In episodes 8 to 11 of Lazarus, things start to finally pick up in a way that makes it feel like this show may actually live up to the hype, as we find out Chris's background, Leland's, which wasn't really all that great, but also there's presented a very valid threat to Axel specifically through this assassin named Saru, and there's also a lot of political backstabbing when it comes to everything that Hirsch and her boss Abel's doing versus the U.S. Army representative, Lieutenant Schneider. So, to break down the episodes, episode 8 goes into Chris's background, and through that we learn that she is somebody who used to be a spy for Russia. She defected after it seeming that she died, but unfortunately she left behind her girlfriend slash lover, who was also a handler named Inga. Inga is the one who saw her at the end of episode 7. The two get into a bit of a tussle back and forth, but Inga, because she still has lingering feelings, she doesn't report finding Chris. And that ultimately leads to Inga's death because the person who worked under Inga now thought that she was a traitor. And when that person decided to go kill Chris, they kill Inga. That person gets killed. It's a bloody mess. But at the very least, we do get Chris's background, which probably out of everybody who got some type of development or background put in, hers is probably the best, and that's including Leland's, who was covered in episode 10. Now, jumping over episode 9 just for a moment, just because of how things connect. Episode 10 focuses on Leland's background, and with it, we find out that he is the bastard child of a very rich man, born from his father's mistress, and he has a very complicated relationship with his sister, who's currently running the family, even though generally his family operates and the male inherits everything and then runs the family business, which is a large estate which has a lot of money in it. But one of the things that you may take note of, which continues to not make a lot of sense, especially after Chris, and we'll kind of mix in a review with the recap right now, it doesn't make sense why exactly Leland is part of this whole organization. He clearly is not that close with his father, but his father and Abel had a relationship. So how exactly this led to Leland ending up with a bracelet where he can't take it off? He's somewhat of a prisoner in Suicide Squad fashion, yet at the same time he's wealthy enough that you think that he could buy, or his father could have buy his way out of him when his father was alive. A lot doesn't make sense. With Chris, it makes sense. She defected from Russia, so of course, her having the ability to move about America by joining Lazarus makes sense. Everyone else, it still is very blurry, but it seems as we reach the end, or the assumed end of the show, Axel's background is getting touched upon a bit more, not necessarily in who he was as a kid and all that, but in terms of one of his first prison sentences, where we find out that he was part of a clinical trial that was made to test Hapner. Now, do they really go too much into it between episodes 9 and 11, even 10 a bit? No. Only thing that we know for sure is by the end of episode 11, it seems Elena might be the first one to succumb to Hapner's side effects. And on top of that, there is a man named Saru who was hired by Lieutenant Schneider and also Captain Hayes in order to take out Axel, because Axel is one of the few people who connect their work to what happened with the testing, which makes him a target. Not only that, Lieutenant Schneider seems to have a real bug in his behind about Hirsch and Abel and wanted to take them down, and Lazarus as a whole too, even though we're coming upon the final days of when people who've taken Hapner are expected to be alive. But you know how shows are. They have to build up the drama, especially toward the end, to give us something that's big. But from what it seems, Dr. Skinner would only getting inch by inch closer to, with the assumption that Popcorn Wizard might be helping him hide. But unfortunately, until episode 12, we won't know if that is true for sure. And honestly, overall, based off these 4 episodes, I'm still very iffy about Lazarus. And honestly, when it comes to Toonami, I'm trying to figure when was the last time they had a good show, because even though this is nowhere as bad as Ninja Kamui was, which apparently got a 2-season renewal, when it comes to Lazarus, it's very stylish, but it still is not consistently given substance. It gave us substance when it came to the Chris backstory and everything it put into that, but in terms of doing it for every single character, making sure there's good development, that you care about these people, and it consistently shows that the characters care about each other, it doesn't really do that. And it's really making it so it has not gotten anywhere as bad as it could have, where you don't really want to watch this anymore. But it's definitely one of those shows where if it doesn't get a second season, it's not necessarily a big loss.